For a little background, the events of this story took place when I was 21 years old. I'm a male and have always been somewhat awkward. I was never in the popular crowd and never really found my clique in high school. I've also always been pretty bad at talking to girls and or asking them out. It's not that I'm really overly nervous, I just never really know the right thing to say or carry on the conversation. I have a twin sister who is the exact opposite. She was always popular, had a ton of friends, and was usually in a steady relationship. She was a bit of a social butterfly, and we used to joke around about how different we were from one another. It never really bothered me, and in fact, some of my fondest memories of my childhood was goofing around and poking fun at each other with my sister. Fast forward to when I was 21, right around Valentines Day. I'm not sure if it was the constant cold weather, or the fact that my sister was hanging out with her boyfriend, but I was feeling especially lonely. I asked my sister if she would help me set up a dating profile on one of the 1,000 dating websites that are out there. We went through all of the criteria and gave it a few days to see if I got any responses. I received a few messages, but the conversations fizzled after a few exchanges back and forth. The day before Valentine's Day, I received a message from a girl who was extremely attractive and who wouldn't give me the time of day in high school. Her name was Gwen, which I very much liked because it reminded me of Gwen Stacy from the Spider-Man comics. She made talking very easy, which was awesome because I was never good at steering conversations. She laughed at my dry sense of humor and always kept the conversation going. Thinking she was possibly not who she said she was, or perhaps a catfish, I asked her to video chat with me and she complied. I was shocked when it was really her. I couldn't believe it. We talked about a lot of things, the things you ask someone when you're getting to know them and clearly interested in. She eventually told me that I was one of the nicest people she had ever spoken to and that I was different than the other guys she had talked to or been with in the past. We eventually set up a plan for a date and to meet in person. When the day came, I picked her up, but not from her house. She said she had to work and I could pick her up downtown. I didn't think anything of it, so it didn't set off any red flags. We had a few drinks and then went to dinner. We had plans to go to the movies after dinner, but as I was paying the check, she said, "Let's go on an adventure." Confused what she meant by that, I asked her to clarify. She said in the bubbly voice I grew so accustomed and comfortable with, "Let's go to Blue Lakes. They have the trails there and the moonlight will be on the lake. It'll be so romantic and way better than any movie." Nervous, but excited, I said of course. But in my own mind, I liked the idea of the movies because I didn't have to worry about what to say and carry on a conversation. We drove to Blue Lakes, which is the name of this beautiful park in my hometown. It's not actually called Blue Lakes, but because the lake has a deep blue color, everybody in town calls it Blue Lakes. We got there at about 10 p.m. and was starting to get nervous and felt like I was somehow going to mess things up. I texted my sister and told her where I was and asked her to give me some kind of advice on what to do or what to say. She didn't respond right away. Thanks, sis. There was a couple of cars in the parking lot, which was weird for the time of night, but I was trying to have fun. She said, "Oh, don't be nervous about the cars. It's probably just some couples still celebrating Valentine's Day." She grabbed my hand and started walking toward one of the trails. She could have said anything at this point, and I would have went along with her. She let go of my hand and walked on the trail beside the lake. She said very loudly, "Wow, look how beautiful this place is." I thought it was kind of weird how loud she said it, but again, I didn't really care. While she was staring at the water, I checked my phone to see if my sister texted me back, and she did. It just said, "Get out of there now." Thoroughly freaked out and truly not sure why, I looked up from my phone at Gwen, who was standing right there with a smile on her face. "What's wrong, Andrew?" she said in a soft voice. I tried, but I couldn't answer. I had 100 things running through my head right now. She said in a flirtatious voice, "Don't you want to kiss me, Andrew?" I finally had the courage to respond and said, "I need to leave." Gwen laughed at me and said, "Don't be shy, Andrew. We just got here." I turned around and tried to walk out of the trail, and there were two guys standing there. I was frozen in fear, not sure why they weren't moving out of the way. Gwen came up behind me and whispered in my ear, "Andrew, we're not leaving yet. My friends just got here." I tried to run, but two more guys ran from the other side and tackled me. I'm a pretty big guy, but I couldn't hold my own against four guys. They held me down, taking turns punching and kicking me. It hurt, but the adrenaline from being scared kept me from being in intense pain. They tied me to a tree, stole my wallet, took my car keys, and hit me a couple more times before leaving. Gwen took my phone and threw it in the lake. Within minutes of being there tied to the tree, I saw flashing lights turn into the park. I screamed for help, and the police found me tied to the tree. They helped me down and began questioning me when my sister arrived. Apparently, as soon as I texted her, she had called the cops and rushed over herself. She was at a party and a group of guys were there, saying that they were going to jump some loser at Blue Lakes. They had an entire plan to rob him and beat him up and leave him there. My sister had exclaimed to them that they were lame and jerks and walked away, not really thinking about it until a couple of hours later when I texted her. Not taking any chances, she called the police. They were able to find one of the four guys, but the other three they couldn't find, and they also couldn't find this Gwen. All of her information online was fake, so they couldn't track her. My car had some minor damage and looked to have been used for drug usage. I only had minor injuries, including a concussion, a badly scraped arm, and some soreness from where I had been kicked. The thing that still haunts me and bothers me to this day is the motivation for this event. Was it really worth all the effort to beat a broke college kid for his wallet and his car? I had maybe a couple of $100 on me, and I canceled my credit card immediately. It just seemed like a lot of time for a small payoff. 4 years later, I still have nightmares of that night. Even though the incident could have been worse, I still have mental scars from getting attacked by a group of strangers. I'm thankful one of them did eventually come to justice, but there was a strong honor amongst these thieves, because the authorities were never able to gather any further information out of him, and all the other individuals had sort of disappeared into obscurity. I have since found an amazing girlfriend and no longer live in my hometown. Hopefully, since this story happened, dating websites have made an effort to authenticate their users, so things like this don't happen again. I have never been a huge fan of Valentine's Day. I have always found the holiday to be kind of a drag and a waste, kind of like New Year's Eve. At the time of the story, I was 20 years old. I worked at a small convenience store that was open 24 hours. I told them that I would work the overnight shift on Valentine's Day because I didn't have any plans. The night started out just like any other night shifts I had worked in the past. Very slow and boring, so I was able to get most of the work done by about midnight. I usually spent the remainder of the shift just watching YouTube or Netflix. At about 1:30 a.m., the bell rang, alerting me that someone had entered the store. He was a tall, somewhat handsome man from what I could tell at a quick glance. I shouted, "How are you tonight, sir?" And he responded almost immediately, "Cassie, is that you?" I paused for a moment in disbelief that he recognized me, and then that's when it hit me. It was a guy named Ricky that I went to high school with. We were never really close, but always very friendly. I immediately greeted him with a hug because that's just my personality. After a minute or two of catching up, I finally asked, "What are you doing in here so late?" He frowned slightly and said, "Well, I just broke up with my girlfriend about a week ago, and honestly, I've been a bit of an insomniac lately and just wandering around." I said I was sorry about the breakup and asked if he needed anything, and he responded in a very genuine voice. "Honestly, it's just really great to see an old friend, and if you wouldn't mind, if you're not too busy, I would love to just sit and talk for a while." I actually thought it was kind of sweet, and felt bad, so I told him he could hang and we could just talk and catch up. The first 10 to 15 minutes were normal, even enjoyable. We laughed and joked about some old high school memories. After about 15 minutes, he asked to use the restroom, and of course I let him. This was when I started to think things through a little bit. This random guy showed up in the middle of the night and just happened to immediately recognize me and strike up a conversation with me. I was sure it was just a coincidence, but it did seem a little bit weird. While he was in the bathroom for a minute, I decided to search him on Facebook and noticed he had some mutual friends. The first thing I noticed was that he had some weird photos. Pictures of him with knives and lots of symbology stuff that almost looked like witchcraft or something. I don't know, I'm not much of a horror buff, but one of the pictures definitely had a pentagram in it. He came out of the bathroom a few moments later, and this is when things started getting really strange. I threw my phone back down and greeted him as if everything were normal. He said in a low, almost disturbing voice, "I'm so happy to see you again." I responded in a confused manner. Yeah, it's great seeing you too." He slammed both hands on the counter that I sat behind and said in a now aggressive voice, "You don't understand. I'm so happy I found you. I love you, Cassie. And we were meant to be together." Going from semi-creeped out to full-on terrified, I just responded nervously, not knowing what else to say. Thanks, Ricky, but I'm seeing someone." That, of course, was a lie, but I honestly didn't know what else to do. At this point, he tried to grab my arm from the other side of the counter, and I jumped back quickly and told him he needed to leave. He took a step away from the counter and looked at me with almost lifeless eyes and a smile that left my body paralyzed. He dropped his coat to the ground and took his shirt off. He was covered with tattoos, really creepy tattoos. Across his chest was the word animal in a crazy font. The rest of his torso was covered with strange symbols. I'm not sure actually what kind of symbols. Under his left pec was my name tattooed. It literally said Cassie in cursive. He then pulled a knife out of his pocket and pointed to the tattoo of my name while he continued his sinister smile and gaze. I know it's easy to say what you would do in this situation, but I was frozen. I felt lightheaded, like I was in a dream and couldn't wake up. I was scared if I made a move, he would lunge at me or try to grab me again. He started to scream my name loudly. "Cassie! Cassie!" I started to cry. I couldn't even catch my breath, and that's when it happened. The bell from the door rang. It was a big man walking into the store. Ricky didn't even flinch. He kept his gaze fixed on me and was slowly approaching me. Once the man saw what was happening and saw me cowering in fear, he ran over and pushed Ricky down. Ricky got up and ignored the man completely and still kept his crazy gaze on me. I picked up my phone to call the police, and that's when Ricky finally ran and tried to jump the counter, and the man took him down again, this time holding him down until the authorities showed up. Ricky was arrested, with that blank stare across his face. That man who saved me just happened to be a passing truck driver wanting to grab a hot cup of coffee. I feel like I owe him my life. I have no idea what Ricky planned on doing, but he was charged and they used video footage from the store to help with the conviction. I'm so thankful for that truck driver, and I will never forget that evil, dead look in Ricky's eyes as he lunged for me. And what was that tattoo? Was it really my name? Or for someone else named Cassie? I don't work overnights anymore, and I actually moved far away from this town. I'm not sure if Ricky ever got help or is still in jail. I have no idea when or where this obsession he developed for me began. And honestly, I don't care. I just hope we never meet again. Valentine's Day is a time for love and showing emotion and gratitude to that very special person in your life. 4 years ago, my girlfriend and I decided to go out for Valentine's Day. Where we live, it is still fairly warm in February, so I decided to take my girlfriend on a picnic that we had been planning for about a week or so. My girlfriend and I love being outdoors, and I figured after the picnic, perhaps we could walk on a trail or perhaps take a quick hike. About a month ago, while I was hiking, I found this amazing spot where I thought we could have the picnic. From one of the main trails, it only took about 15 minutes to walk there, and it wasn't that hard of a walk either. You did have to go off of one of the main trails, around a semi-narrow bend and leading to a small rock formation. The area overlooked our home. It was a beautiful view and enough flat land where we could sit and have a really nice picnic. I set up an entire area for us, chairs, tables, and a bunch of our favorite snack foods. On the rear side of this spot was more woods, and even in the daylight there were so many trees back there that it seemed dark. So when Valentine's Day finally came, we set off for our adventure. Thankfully, it was a beautiful sunny day. It was warm with a nice breeze and not a cloud in the sky. We held hands on the trail until we got to the spot where I went off the trail. I told her to trust me as we went off the path. She was hesitant, but was down for the journey. Just as I expected, the short trip was easy for her. We reached the spot in no time, and she was blown away. She just stopped and stared out at the horizon in awe. When she saw the spread of food I had, she was even more blown away. Today could not have gone any better, and in almost a blink of an eye, that changed. While we were laughing and staring at the beautiful view, she stopped suddenly. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that she had heard something in the woods. I looked behind in the dark trees, but saw nothing. I told her she was crazy, just kidding around, obviously, and tried to go back to flirting with her, but she wasn't having it. She insisted that I checked out the woods. So, annoyed more than anything, I told her I would. I got right up to where the tree line started, and I peeked through some endless amounts of trees. I saw nothing. If I'm being honest, I had a really hard time making out anything in there, but I truly didn't see anything. She approached after a minute or two and said in a terrified voice, "Right there! You don't see that shape? It looks like a person." I squinted and tried to make out the shape. It just looked like a shadow to me. "Babe, I think that's just a shadow," I responded in an almost condescending voice. She was hysterical and asked me to please look at it. So I stepped into the dark forest, and to my absolute fear, the dark figure moved. It was very slight, almost like a shoulder shrug, but I saw it. At this moment, I felt intense anxiety and fear, but I didn't want to freak out my girlfriend, or even worse, alert this potentially dangerous person that I knew that they were there. After only a couple of steps, I told my girlfriend I needed something, and I turned back to where we were sitting. I grabbed my girlfriend and tried to tell her not to freak out, but that I did in fact see a person in the trees. She was crying hysterically, and I was just trying to think of the best way to get out fast. I looked down over the lookout, but it was just too steep. The only way was the way we came, which was fine, but I just didn't want this lunatic to follow us. I decided to leave all the stuff behind and start walking down the rock formation. She went down first as I stared into the trees, and that's when I saw it clear as day. This shadow figure was definitely a man, and he was approaching us now. He was only about 45 or 50 feet away. I couldn't make out any specific details, but it looked like he had a beard. I finally started going down the rock formation, and I told my girl to run as fast as she could. We made it to the trail quickly. As we stopped to catch our breath, we heard the rustling of trees and the crack of sticks. This man was chasing us. She pulled out her phone to call the police, but apparently she didn't have a signal. Of course. We finally reached the parking lot of the park trails, and there were 2 police cars. The police were already looking for someone. Apparently, there was a woman jogging the trails early in the morning and found a man laying off to the side of one of the trails. She called the authorities right away, and the man reported being mugged and robbed. We told the cops everything, but by the time they got into the woods, they couldn't find the man. From what I understand, they never caught this crazy person in the woods, and I'm not sure what he would have done if he actually caught up to us. I still can't believe my girlfriend spotted him from so far away, and I'm so thankful she did. We both have a really hard time going on nature trails now, and I still have yet to return to that specific park. From now on, we decided it was best just to stay indoors, especially for Valentine's Day. This is a short story that happened to me last year on Valentine's Day. I recently bought a house with my soon-to-be husband. He works really hard and always spoils me when he can. While he was at work, I decided to run down to the local store and buy some stuff to make him a romantic dinner. The store is literally 100 yards away from my house at most, so I quickly left around 1 p.m. and did not lock my door. I live in a really safe area with hardly any crime, and the police station right around the block. I was going to be back in less than 10 minutes, so I didn't think it was a big deal to lock my door. I left and came back in just under 15 minutes. I waited in line longer than I thought. The rest of my afternoon was normal. I prepared dinner and got the table set with candles and everything along those lines. My afternoon was fairly normal and just like any other day. At about 4:30 p.m., I went to the bathroom and thought I could smell a funny smell, almost like cologne. My boyfriend didn't wear cologne, but I didn't think too much about it. Maybe it was my body wash from the shower or something along those lines. A little after 7, my boyfriend came home from work. He greeted me with Valentine's Day flowers and an amazing piece of cheesecake that I would be having for dessert. I was thrilled. He was also so thankful for the dinner I had prepared for him, and we had a lovely evening. After we ate, he said he was going to go wash up and meet me on the couch for a movie and some cheesecake. As he walked upstairs where our bathroom was, he stopped talking mid-sentence and said in a voice that still haunts me, "What's that smell?" I came to the bottom of the stairs and asked if he smelled the cologne too. He did and immediately mouthed the words, "Call 911" to me. I went into the other room and called. I tried to whisper as to not alert the potential intruder. What my boyfriend didn't tell me until later was that he saw muddy footprints on the bathroom floor, and the shower curtain was open with 2 wet, dirty footprints inside. Next to the bathroom is a spare room that we don't use, and the door was shut, and that door is never shut. He grabbed the door slowly and tried to turn the handle, but it was being held from the other side. He kicked open the door, and to the horror of both of us was a small, dirty-looking man. He was dressed in all black with brown work boots. My boyfriend, who is only an average build, slammed him down with ease and pushed him against the wall. After only a few moments, the police showed up and quickly ran upstairs. Luckily, nobody was hurt, and the intentions of this intruder were unknown. I was alone all afternoon with him, and he did nothing. I couldn't sleep well that night. I remembered that it was all my fault. I always locked the door, and this one time I decided not to. I began to freak out that the man was in the shower right next to me when I was going to the bathroom. I'm just thankful my boyfriend didn't get hurt, and the police station is literally right around the block. This year he took off Valentine's Day with me, and we're still trying to cope with the experience. The worst part is we still never got answers. We don't know why this man broke in, and I'm not sure we ever will. So the events of this story happened to me 2 years ago on Valentine's Day. It was the first Valentine's Day I had celebrated with my now fiancée Dee. We decided it would be nice to go on a double date with a mutual couple we both knew. The evening was nice and relaxing. We went to their house for a lovely dinner and some games. None of us really were the type that liked going out drinking or partying, so this was an ideal night for us. After a couple of hours, we decided we were going to go home for the night and watch some movies in front of our electric fireplace. Now, the couple whose house we went to didn't really live too far away, but they did kind of live in the middle of nowhere. We live in a decent-sized town, but once you reach the outskirts of town, it's a lot of cornfields, farms, and huge open fields. So even though it was only about a 10-minute drive, it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. When you leave our friend's house, you travel down a long road with no lights for about a mile or so, Then take a left and travel down another even longer road in the pitch black until eventually you reach the outskirts of town. Well, about halfway down the road we saw these flashing lights shining through the seemingly endless row of trees until we finally saw it. After we passed all of the trees, we pulled over on the side of the road, and there, hovering over the field, was a massive craft of some kind. I'm not real good with measurements, but I would say about the size of a plane, but a very strange shape. It was long and kind of flat with a pointed edge. It was clearly hovering over the field, high enough that it was well above us but not moving. There was lights all over the craft, and many of them were flashing in an erratic pattern. My then girlfriend and I sat in amazement and admittedly fear at this huge craft, and the most peculiar thing was that it was quiet. You couldn't hear any noise whatsoever coming from the craft. As I took out my phone to try and record this, all the lights went off on the craft. I tried to snap a picture at this point, but it was just too dark, and the picture just looks black. The craft then started to make a very loud humming noise, and even though we could barely see it, it started to slowly approach the road where we were parked. At this point, scared and nervous, we decided to drive away. When we got to the end of the road, we saw the lights again poking through the trees. Once we got home, we tried calling our friends several times, but they didn't answer. Finally, about an hour later, she called back and said she was sorry and didn't even hear her phone ring, which we found strange because her phone was always on high. We told her about the events, and she seemed very skeptical. She said living over there her entire life, she has never seen or heard anything like that ever. We talked about the event for a while and eventually said goodbye and enjoyed the rest of Valentine's Day and really had a great rest of the evening. Shortly after that night, we found out that several people in the area had experienced seeing strange things like that. Apparently, there is a military base nearby, and some believe that they are testing some kind of new military equipment. Others think it's something perhaps extraterrestrial. I'm not sure what I saw that evening, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt I saw something big and very close to me, something that I am unable to explain. Has anyone ever seen this craft I speak of? I'm just looking for answers. The last 2 years on Valentine's Day, we have gone back at the same time to see if we see anything, and we've seen nothing since that night. Though this was strange and terrifying, it has given us a Valentine's Day tradition and an event that we will never forget. The contents of this story have caused me to recently move back with my parents who live in another state. Last year, I was enjoying my first year of being a college grad and living in my own house. Well, a house I rented, but I still lived alone. I was focused on my job and wasn't really looking for a boyfriend or anything like that. Every morning, I go down to the park, which is only about a 2-minute walk, and I jog before getting ready for work. On Valentine's Day, my routine was no different. As I was finishing my jog, I was approached by a pretty handsome-looking man. He was tall, looked in shape, styled hair, and super white teeth. My creep alarm was not going off at all. He said in a calming voice, "You're very pretty. I just thought I wanted to tell you that, and hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day." And then he just jogged off. Honestly, it kind of made me smile because that kind of stuff doesn't usually happen to me. After all that excitement, I just continued on with my day like I would any other day. At about 1 p.m., the secretary at my job told me I had a package. I thought this was very strange considering I had never gotten packages before. It was a huge, beautiful bouquet of roses. There was a note on the roses that said, "To the lovely lady I saw at the park, I hope this makes you smile." Now, it did make me smile, which is stupid, but I admittedly realized how weird and creepy it was. That night, I was cooking dinner and was going to do some work from my home computer. I thought I could hear a noise outside my window, but I just chalked it up to the wind or something. I got up a little after 8 to clean some dishes and take a break from the computer. I looked out my kitchen sink window and saw a car outside my house parked in the street. No, I had no other reason to be freaked out other than just a bad feeling. There was no parking on my street after 7 p.m., and I had never seen this car before. Now again, there could have been dozens of explanations, but I just didn't feel good about the entire situation. It just felt really off. I sat back down at the computer trying to focus on my work, but I had this sickening feeling in my stomach. As I sat there in dead silence of my room is when I was sure I could hear something. I had a window that sat right next to my computer where I was sitting. I pulled back the curtain and exposed the man from the park trying to break into the window. We locked eyes, and he just stared at me like a deer in headlights. He did not have that same smile as before at the park. He looked mean, aggressive. After only a couple of seconds of eye contact, which seemed like an eternity, he started to bang on the window and screaming, "Let me in." I screamed and ran to the other room, calling the police. He must have heard me because I saw out of the kitchen window him run to the car in front of my house. I couldn't make out the license. All I knew is that it was a white Chevy of some kind, which describes about 1 billion people. I never forgot the look in his eyes. Almost immediately, I moved home. I never stayed in that house again. I was advised to stay at a hotel for a couple of nights, and then I drove home to my parents. I'll never forget that almost evil look he had as we locked eyes through the window, no more than inches apart. They never found the man I described, and many people think I made this story up. But I'll never forget the horror of that Valentine's Day. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. And sometimes you have to click it again later because it just goes away for some reason. I don't really know why. Now, if you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit r/letsreadofficial and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me and this channel even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. All links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and have a very happy and safe Valentine's Day.